Okay, we are now recording. So in case anybody misses this, good morning, everybody. Good morning, good morning, good morning, good morning. Good morning, good morning, good morning. Okay, here this morning and say hello, and then I've got a bunch of fun things and then some stuff to begin before we get into the first world religion we're studying. Okay, I want to say hello to Pat over north of Tampa. Maureen Sullivan is down in farmers in farm country, soybeans, swamp, and prunes. Nanette is up in, oh my God, there's sun out there and it's actually warm in Connecticut. Thing one has a ponytail in case any of you missed this. She is surfing again. Look at that. She has a surfing t-shirt on and has a ponytail. Ray Roldan sent me a thing, as did Nanette, about cats. They're going to be quoted in the worship service on the 27th, both of them. I'll get to that in a minute. Barbara Young is back from the wilds. We're glad to see you again, Barbara. We've missed you. Melissa is here this morning, out from the golf course. Ron, excuse me, Ron was out on the beach with his wife. Do you mind already? Forget the fact it's been 2 years since they had a vacation. Takes off and leaves us, abandons us. I'm tired of the abandonment already. Nick has got something on his face. I'm not sure why he's hiding himself, but he got that fancy haircut. Mary Grimmy, you all know I've known Mary since 1985. She was in Port Orange, maybe a little later than that. Her son, Donald, is some of the one who does the tech. And you may have seen a picture of Donald age 3 or 4 with a big deacon from years and years and years and years ago. He was two, and you see him with next to the deacon. All right. Excuse me, Doug was golfing in Bavaria. I mean, do you mind already? Golfing, excuse me.
Yeah,
Golfing in Bavaria.
I inherited it from my father. What can I say?
Oh, do you mind?
Your uncle.
Ah, yeah, we had to mention that. My uncle, that's true. All right, Kay Schweitzer is here from Port Orange. Joyce Anderson is here from Miami. Cecilia, my neighbor down the street, and Sarah is here from Alabama. Okay, so we want to say hello to everybody as we begin. And let me remind everybody, this is designed so you can come and go as you wish. Some fun stuff before we get into the other stuff. Let me remind everybody it is Pride Month. And to show you how things happen historically, I was at Union Theological Seminary when the great Stonewall riot took place, and we had no idea it was going on. We were
Today is the big Pride Parade in Wilton Manors, Fort Lauderdale, and I will be going and attending.
Okay. Stonewall happened, and we were up in one part of Manhattan and missed it completely. Had no idea what was going on, and then find out this big thing happened, and like, oh. So later, Roy from Bellevue, Washington. Okay, it's Juneteenth. A reminder that the celebration of the end of slavery, and of course, we're still dealing with racism, as you all know. Okay, I have a bunch of fun stuff for us here, interesting. On May 8th, all hell broke loose again with the Southern Baptist Convention. Their second largest church, 28,000 members in Saddleback Church, it's called, in Lake Forest, California, did the unthinkable and ordained not 1, but 3 women to its pastoral staff. 3 women. The Southern Baptist Convention had physical responses to this and other kinds of manifestations of great annoyance. But the congregation is the second largest congregation, and they've got 3 women, and at this point, they've got an issue. AJ Du Bois is with us, AJ and Holly from Wisconsin and Minnesota. Say hello to them this morning too. You may have read about the Eucharist and Joe Biden. Let me see if I can share a couple of things about that to begin with. Eucharist simply means Thanksgiving. It's also known as Holy Communion and the Lord's Supper. I didn't know if you were aware of this, but this was a shock to me. The Pew Foundation surveyed Roman Catholics in the United States. Now, let me say a word about names. The word Catholic is not copyrighted. Anybody can use the word Catholic. I bet you didn't know that. The reason we often use the word Roman Catholic is it reminds those Catholics who take their leadership from Rome. But you might be interested in knowing that John Calvin wrote, the church is Catholic, evangelical, and reformed. We've got Orthodox churches consider themselves Catholic. It means simply universal. So you're going to find all kinds of churches call themselves Catholic, but they're not Roman Catholic. So when we use that, we don't use that pejorative. We're trying to say the parameters of what that means. It turns out the Pew Foundation surveyed Roman Catholics in the United States, and 2/3 had the idea that the Eucharist was a memorial, was a commemoration, a symbolic kind of thing, which sounded very, very Protestant on any number of levels. It is not Roman Catholic teaching. I'll explain Roman Catholic teaching as this. You have bread and wine, but the real bread and wine is someplace else. These are just physical accidents, as they're called, of what real bread and wine is. So at the prayer, with a properly ordained priest who has the proper ordination and the proper training, only when the priest says a certain prayer, a magical, mystical, I shouldn't say magical, a mystical moment takes place where, though it continues to look like bread and wine, it is in fact transformed into the actual body and blood of Jesus. So that though you are looking at bread and wine, it is in the real order of things above really now the body and blood of Jesus. It turns out 2/3 of Roman Catholics in this country don't believe that, which has caused great consternation amongst the bishops. Number two, I don't know if you are aware of this, but even though the bishops may pass something in this country, it is not binding on each bishop. Let's say you and I were a bunch of bishops and we had a set of guidelines. The guidelines are not mandatory. And today in the New York Times, they were covering the fact that the head of the commission that's looking on guidelines about abortion and other things. Yes, that's what transubstantiation means, then. It means you have an accident of real bread and real wine, but that is simply an accident. The real blood is someplace else. So when you say the prayer by a priest, the prayer of consecration, meets up with Ron's group about 1,000 miles away. They're both hunter-gatherers, and there are lots of moments. The moments then produce lots of children, and the children grow up and they're admixtured, and then you get a whole blending of, and pretty soon you're going to find that within a couple of 100 years, you can't differentiate Nanette's group and Ron's group anymore at all. It becomes indistinguishable. Absolutely becomes indistinguishable. Western steppe herders and populations of that culture and another culture are genetically indistinguishable. They live primarily as nomads with a chiefdom system, wheeled carts and wagons that allowed them to manage large herds. This group of admixtures will put together the famous Yamna culture, which we'll get to in a minute, which will help birth where we're going. But I need to give you an idea where we're going to go. All right. Now, I drove Maureen nuts. I want you to know I live for this. I live. Where's Maureen's sister? Maureen, I want you to, Maureen, where's thing one? I want you to know, Pat, I drove your sister nuts this week. I put a map up and she kept on saying it was wrong. And it drove her nuts. I live for this. I'm trying to do a lot of work and I'm living for driving Maureen nuts.
You kept telling me I was wrong. I wasn't telling you you were wrong.
Right. I was telling Maureen she was wrong. I loved it. Like I have nothing else to do. We'll get to this in a minute. Aryan. Aryan does not mean what you may think it means. It got ruined by the Nazis. Aryan originally meant, are you ready for this? In ancient language, it meant noble or distinguished person. That's all it meant. Somehow, mutations take place on the Black Sea area, around the Black Sea. Are you ready for this? Upper Mongolia and northern Siberia. Because of vitamin A and other things, you've got vitamin D, and mutations take place. And 6,000 to 10,000 years ago, blonde hair and blue eyes make their scene on Homo sapiens with African skin around the Black Sea. So if you go to the Yamna culture, you're going to find hunter-gatherers of dark skin from Africa originally, suddenly getting blue eyes and some having blonde hair from mutations. This is new to humankind. And so when you get the Nazis saying, well, this stuff came from me, no, not at all. And the Aryan does not mean blonde hair and blue eyes, it simply meant distinguished one. So you need to know then in modern scholarship, when you look up Indo-Aryan, those days are over. You're looking at old scholarship. New scholarship is Indo-Iranian. Indo-Iranian. So that way you know where Iran is. So that's what we're talking about. And Iran is really the southern part of the Yamna culture. Now I'm going to pull that up in a minute so you can see what we're talking about. This, by the way, this is leading someplace. Just bear with me. All right. Let's see if I can do this right. Share screen. Ta-da. This is what I sent. I sent you all in a map. See this area here? This is the part right here. This ultimately is what comes together about 5,000 YA years ago. This will be called the Yamna culture, Y-A-M, let me spell right, Y-A-M-N-A-Y, Yamnaya culture. It will lead, you can see here, but this is an admixture itself of people from here and here. Bringing people from here and from here will result in this. Okay, now we're going to go back. If you can see this right here, guess what, folks? This tells you what happened. We had an admixture of groups here, hunter-gatherers, and a group here that come down. And about 5,000 years ago, two things happened. The wheel gets invented. Are you ready for that? And around the same time, the horse gets tamed. Bingo. The horse gets tamed. The wheel gets invented. Now it means that hunter-gatherers and farmers begin to put together a society that can move. And so when crops get bad and weather gets bad, you move. And so this group is a group of people that move. Notice they move west. You see here, 2,400 years ago, 2,500 years ago. See this? See this? This is all BC. Look at this. And they move over here. You can see right here. They move here. They move here, and our group moves down over here. Do you see this area right in here? See this area right in here, the Yamna culture, right over in here. Okay. All righty. Now, some other things you need to know. You and I, growing up, were told that we moved out of Africa. Homo sapiens gets started in Africa. Now, you do remember that Homo sapiens are preceded by Neanderthals, who probably also came out of Africa hundreds of thousands of years ago. And before them were Homo erectus. Homo erectus was in China 1.2 million years ago. They're also homos, part of the hominid. Then don't forget, Neanderthals will move east. They will interbreed with Denisovians, and they're going to interbreed with Southeast Asian indigenous peoples. You might be interested in knowing that the Neanderthal admixture in most Southeast Asians today is stronger than it is in Europeans. The Southeast Asian population was not as mobile in many ways and stayed. Northern Europeans are not in a good place to live. Volcanoes went off in Italy and wiped out Europe about 33,000 years ago. An ice age 22,000 years ago and wiped out most of Europe. And where were those people repopulated from? The east, on the very, very western tips end of what we call the steppes. I don't know if you've ever taken a look at the steppes. Let me put up a map of the steppes. Most people don't understand what the steppes mean. This comes as a big shock to my students, that this area here, believe it or not, is flat. Most people don't wonder how you can migrate. This is flat. Did you know that? It goes all the way from Hungary straight down through here. It's flatland, absolutely flat, all the way over through the Altari Mountains and beyond over into Western China. It's flat. Therefore, when you get the Yamna culture here with wagons and horses, you can see how they can move because it's all flat. So when you talk about, Kenneth, how do these people, look at this, look at this, it's all flat. So you see how big this is? Look at this. There's a little break in here and you take off again. Look at all of that. And people say, how did people move? You had indigenous peoples, and then they're going to be moving with people who move. Homo sapiens tend to like to move. Neanderthals moved, Homo erectus moved. There is something within our species that likes to move. Now, some of you know, you're going to have friends of yours who do not like to move, they stay put. And of course, one of the great surprises of the United States is 29% of the people in this country have never left their state. If you want to understand some of the politics of the United States, imagine growing up in some of our most rural states and 29% of the population has never left there. So that means that their introduction to the larger world, the larger country, and larger cultures and ways of looking at things is extraordinarily limited. Let me also point out the educational systems in those states have have some limitations. Is that fair? Is that a fair way to put it? Have some limitations. So you need to know that while there are those who like to stay put, our species and Neanderthals and Denisovians and others tend to move, and they moved east and west. And so what that's going to mean comes as a big surprise, but just guess what they found in Morocco. When I was growing up, I realized that was about the time dirt appeared on the planet. When I was growing up, I met some people in Jacksonville, actually proud they did not have passports. Yeah, we get that. I don't know if when you were growing up, but I was told everybody left like Ethiopia and Kenya. They went off the coast of East Africa and went up. That now has been shot out of the water. They found a Homo sapiens skull in Morocco. Let me tell you the dating of this. The dating of this is 280 to 350,000 years ago. That meant that now the new theory is that Africans left all over the continent, north and east. The idea they just went along the coast. Some did, but others went up north. And the whole thing has been blown out of water. They never expected that. So it turns out our ancestors, and when I say our ancestors, that means Neanderthals. Remember, we have what, 4 to 5% Neanderthal in us. And it turns out 20% of Neanderthal is in a lot of the stuff you and I do, the way we digest food, the way we deal with skin cancer and things like that. You ought to read this on the internet. How much of Neanderthal is within our systems that we're just now aware of. The interbreeding was interesting. Neanderthal men and Homo sapien women could not produce children that were viable. That's the way they put it. It means the children didn't live. But Neanderthal women and Homo sapien men produced a lot. The latest theory is the reason ultimately Neanderthals died out is for 2 reasons. Number one, a lot of them were in cold weather and simply did not have big numbers. The second part was the interbreeding finally bred them out. So there was no great war. There was no great bloodshed. There was no great one group devouring the other. But gradually, in the northern parts, there were just not that many. And either between weather, death, and interbreeding, they finally, the last ones we have are about 25, 30,000 years ago. But so when you see admixtures, don't be surprised when you look up, and I wouldn't be surprised if you find more Neanderthal as they do our genetic structure better. Okay, so out of Africa, that blows everything out of the water. And finally, cradles of civilization. And then we'll get into Hinduism. Cradles of civilization. All right. When I was growing up, I was told there was a cradle of civilization, Mesopotamia, the Fertile Crescent. But did you ever do something when you were in school and you got that and you kept on reading about the Egyptians? And you might have asked yourself, wait a minute, what happened to the Egyptians? They're at the same time, why aren't they included a cradle of civilization? And I never got a good answer to that. Well, it turns out that my education was incredibly limited. I thought it was great at the time, but it turns out it was incredibly limited. Take down a piece of paper, you've got a test. You have a piece of paper in front of you. Name to me, write down as you think, what are the ancient cradles of civilization? Write down to see what you think they are. The ancient cradles of civilization. Don't put them up. Don't put them up. Don't put them up. Don't put them up. No. Maureen, hop that down. Not yet. Not yet. Not yet. Maureen.
I don't know how to delete. You can't delete once something is in the
Just
chat.
wait. I'm going to ask
Sorry.
everybody. Just wait.
I was about to yell it out.
Oh, just pass it. What's the Spanish? Those 2 words that never apply to me.
Your favorite word.
Paciencia y tranquilo. Is that right, Serge?
Yeah, that's about right. Paciente is perfect.
All right, let's see how everybody did. All right, everybody got the Fertile Crescent. Somebody, one person, just one person want to give me the second one. Anybody? Ron, what do you got?
I got the Dravidians in India. That's in Amudarya.
Ron, you can go home now. I never liked you
Okay.
anyway.
Sorry.
China.
All right. Now, wait a minute. Whoa, we got 2, 3. Yeah. Now, you know, it's a funny thing. Everybody forgets China. Some of the earliest writing we have is on caves overlooking one of the great rivers in China. Homo erectus was in China 1.2 million years ago. Why doesn't anybody ever put the dots? I never understood that. The 2 great northern river systems in China. Do you all remember reading about that guy who was the greatest explorer in the world at the time in the 1300s? He went from China. Yes, he went from China all the way over to Kenya. It turns out he had a huge squadron of boats, enormous boats, and went trading everywhere. Nobody had ever done that before. And people just, I don't know where our education was. I remember stumbling across him in accident. No, I was waiting in a doctor's office and picked up a National Geographic and looked at this and said, where's my education been? And it says, didn't you know this? And I thought, what is this? Turned out one of the greatest explorers of humankind.
What was it?
Huh?
What was his name?
Oh, help me. Wait a minute. I'll tell you, I'll look it up. Hold it. Wait. Here we go. Zheng He, Zenghe, from 1371 to 1433, lived during the Ming Dynasty. Zhenghe. He had boats the size of aircraft carriers. It's incredible. Like a fleet of 400 boats. It was incredible. Went from around the China coast down through Singapore, all the way down across what we now call Bangladesh, around India, up the Persian Gulf, and then explored all around down the Arabian Peninsula over to what we now call Kenya. Unbelievable. Did stuff, and I made a couple of trips. Absolutely fascinating. And I found about him in a doctor's office reading a National Geographic. That's embarrassing. That is absolutely embarrassing. Okay, we've got 3. We got 3 more to go. What are they? Anybody? 3 more to go. Anybody? Maureen, you have one of them.
Andes?
Andes, yes, the ancient Andes. Now, it turns out in digging in the Amazon, they found out that what I was taught was wrong. I don't know if you were taught this. There was the Great Migration, migration across the Bering Strait down in, and there was an area that was free of ice, and they come plodding down in, and there you got it. Turns out that's all wrong. That was the youngest. There were 2 others before that. Who knew that? Well, they dug up bones of Homo sapiens in the Amazon. Are you ready for this? And dated them 20,000 years ago, 7,000 earlier than what we had been taught. They've now discovered cave art in Colombia and some other places that is also 20,000 years old. And they went along the Andes and dug up more bones, and all in the last couple of years, and carbon 14 them. It turns out our dating was all wrong, and our understanding of who was here is all wrong as well. So there were people coming from, you ready for this? Northern Mongolia, Siberia, and all of northern Central Asia, plopping along the Bering Strait, and came down. Some wound up in the Amazon basin, some wound up across the Andes.
Rev,
Yes.
I read that the indigenous peoples of the Americas actually were genetically that huge group that came down from Siberia that you were describing, but also another group coming from the Polynesian Islands and Southeast Asia also were part of that
admixture.
They interbred and
admixture, and admixture.
And that's what our Native American population is today.
When you start looking at the Polynesians, by the way, there's a big thing about originally they came from Taiwan. There's a map now that suggests genetically when you look at New Guinea and parts of New Guinea and stuff that originally relates to ancient civilizations out of Taiwan. Meanwhile, the Aborigines in Australia are similar to the Tamils in the very southern tip of India, who go back to the Sands tribe in Africa. So you've got multiple migrations.
Hey, Ken, this is Karen.
Yes.
On the road. And just to follow up on Noreen, my family has a genetic link to the Samoans, S-A-M-O-A-N-S, and it comes through the Mi'kmaq Indians who are up in Eastern Canada. So that's a migration from the Pacific that went to the Western Americas and then got pushed over as these later migrations came and ended up clear across the continent.
So there you see it. We are, when somebody says we're exceptional, we are exceptionally mixed. And Carol Ryder made the comment years ago, and I repeat this in class all the time, it's too bad you're not given stapled, so you can't remove the staple, a DNA printout of all the DNA you have with your damn birth certificate. So, you could actually see how mixed you are, because it would be really, really helpful, I think. And that's why I start my class. Oh, I didn't mention this. I'm teaching summer B and it's packed. With the enrollment down, I have no idea, but we start out and you have, if you wish, it's not mandatory. If you share, and half the kids have done their DNA and they share their DNA. And I tell you, every semester we wind up between 36 and 40 countries represented. That many. And the kids love it because they instinctively know this now. Their grandparents won't believe it, but they get it. So we're raising a whole new group of young people who get the admixtures and the diversity and embrace it rather than being in denial. And I think that's important. They're embracing it rather than being in denial. What DNA program? I use two. I use MyHeritage and Ancestry. They're all good. I mean, your blood is your blood. You turn it in, and they update them all the time. I don't know if any of you have done your DNA, but they update it regularly because the more people they get in, the more they refine it. All right, Maureen uses Ancestry and 23andMe. They're all good. And they're very delightful to see that the difference. They give you the basics, then you give you the 1% and 2% to show you the different genes that come in. Okay, we've got 4. We're missing 2. We're missing 2. Who knows what they are?
I would say Africa.
We've got Fertile Crescent, India, China, the Andes. We're missing 2. What are we missing now? Come on.
Africa?
No.
Mesoamerica, Mexico,
Mesoamerica.
Aztecs, and the Mayans.
Okay. Pat, you're almost right. Egypt. We forgot Egypt. Egypt. Okay, so it turns out that there was not a cradle of civilization, but there were cradles of civilization that cropped up individually and separately at different spots on the planet. Now, Doug mentioned aliens. There are those who have argued that the way this all happened is aliens were dropping seeds all over the place and different things popped up. I I want to point out that Doug used to be a cousin of mine, but because of theories like this, a vote was taken and we gave him to AJ as part of her family now. And we've substituted Ron for Doug. Although I'm not so sure that was a good idea either. All right, so we've got Mesopotamia, all right, the Fertile Crescent, number one. These are all at the same time. This is what's wild. Ancient Egypt. Now that should be an odd, right? Ancient Egypt, but you think, no, they were not, okay. Ancient India, ancient China, the Andes, and Mesoamerica. Now think how wild that is in terms of cropping up on this planet. Think how wild that is in terms of, and not all of them were warlike. Not all of them were. And let's remember the famous phrase, hunter-gatherers, because that's what originally everybody was, hunter-gatherers. And that's, by the way, how the first addictions took place. You're gathering stuff, and I was trying to explain this to Margarita's son last night. He comes over and watches TV. Margarita and Leslie Ann are raising Grant. And so he has two male figures, and we're laughing if this is good or bad. Serge spends time with him, and I spend time with him. And I'm not sure if that's a good idea or not. But he comes over and he watches, we watched The Witcher together for several weeks, and now we're watching Blood and Stone. And we're talking about how things happen. I said, when you're doing a hunter-gathering, imagine a bunch of us sitting around, and Ron over there picks up some leaf and starts nudging on the leaf and goes, woo! Hey, Kenneth, you want to try this? And of course, you remembered the leaf. I said, back then you didn't write it down. There was no photo op. You remembered it. I mean, you remembered that. Meanwhile, my cousin Doug, from a former life, picked up a mushroom, and suddenly he was no more. So he said, don't pick up that mushroom. He came back as a zombie and was reanimated. And we learned from using him as a reanimation what we could eat for mushrooms and what we couldn't. But you know, that's how things happen. People would pick stuff up. They'd get responses. This was delicious. Somebody died. Don't touch that. And they remembered. And I was trying to say to Grant, when your life depends upon it, I said, probably those hunter-gatherers' senses were far more attuned to nature than ours were. If your life depended on it, you could smell animals a long distance. You could hear things. You could see things. Am I right? Think about that. We go out. I bet you if you and I went out to an area that had lots of wild animals, we wouldn't hear half the stuff we would heard if we'd been there 5,000 years ago. Your senses, because your life depends on it, are going to pick up things that they're going to hear things, a crack of a brush or something like that. They're going to smell things, know things, sense things that you and I would be numbed about. And that would be true about what you eat and what you don't eat. So in a sense, we make fun of hunter-gatherers, but their sense systems, I bet you, were far more tuned to what's going on around them than ours are. Wouldn't you think? Just as a matter of general survival. One last thing then, and next time we'll get on to the Arapaculture. One last thing. They did a study. Jared Diamond mentioned this about indigenous peoples in New Guinea. Okay. That's blood, germs, and steel. Yeah.
Guns, germs, and steel.
Guns, germs, and steel. One of the things that another thing came out this week is about our deaths. It turns out that no matter what you try to do, our species biologically has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And when you look at mortality rates, like for instance, the average life expectancy during the time of Jesus was 25. But the reason for that is because so many people died at birth, year 1, year 2, and women died giving birth. But if you survive that, ancient cemeteries, by the way, I don't know if you knew this, most ancient cemeteries, 50% of them are made of, are buried, their people are buried, they're 15 years and younger, 15 years old and younger. That's one of those facts I ran across the other day. It was like, whoa. But if you live long, the reality is, and you read all this stuff today about people trying to live longer and do things and take all kinds of weird stuff. The reality is we're all systemed at some point to begin to decay. And some decay quicker, and some, that's where your genetic system comes in. Some people have long family lives, but ultimately they end. Maria's family, all of her grandmothers and her mother lived to be well into their 90s. Her mother was 96. Her other grandmothers were 98, 97, 96, and 94. My great-grandfather, Grandfather Justice to be lived 96. Grandmother, what did she live to be 94? My mother lived to be 94. And they all had bad cancers early in life and survived long into old age. Other people have different genetic systems, but we live, we get middle-aged, and then we die. The question I raise for everybody is, if you're going to do that, how do you do that well? How do you make what you've got exciting, energized, enjoyable, and you continue to learn? You continue to relate. Now, when I tell you all how much I enjoy the class, I enjoy it. I do a lot of work to prepare for this, but I love doing the work, because where are you going to find a group of people you can interrelate to today with different points of view? If you read this stuff I got about dogs and cats and what people thought about dogs and cats and souls, I was overwhelmed, and I thought, wow. But what really overwhelmed me is you can get with people so many different opinions and they play well together. And that's unusual. That's very unusual, especially right today. Okay, next class, we start on the evolving of what will become known as the Arapa culture and what will be called known as the Indus Valley culture. That is ancient India. We're talking the Arapa culture, Indus Valley culture, is about 5,000 years ago, YA, years ago. Maybe a little longer. Depending upon who you want to talk to for dating. You're going to see that what happens is an admixture. You have indigenous peoples who are hunter-gatherers. Then you're going to get that Yamnaya migration that moves not only west, but it moves east. And that migration is made up of an admixture of hunter-gatherers from the southern steppes of the southern steppe area of Central Asia. And they're going to be around the Black Sea hunter-gatherers. They will come together, and in their admixture and living together and growing together, somehow they're going to invent the wheel and they're going to tame the horse. The admixture putting these two hunter-gatherers together, somewhere, somebody gets the idea of making a wheel. Who did that? I have no idea. It's lost in antiquity, and they somehow gathered the idea of, for the first time, taming the horse. And while all this is going on, people with dark skin are having blue eyes and blonde hair. Mutations. Mutations happen all the time in the human genome, and we forget that. We forget that. And so when the Nazis were talking about a super race, that was interesting, but it didn't exist. It was a bunch of peasant hunter-gatherers who put two and two together because they had to live and survive. And so that's why we now drop in the very, very most modern stuff. It is Indo-Iranian. Drop the word Aryan, because Aryan has been so misused. Indo-Iranian culture. So you get an idea. We've got a lot of pre-Homo sapien. We've got a lot of Neanderthal. Admixtures moving east. We've got indigenous peoples in the east. Indigenous peoples that came out of Africa long before you and I were taught. Long before you and I taught. We can go back 300, 400,000 years ago. It's much, much, much earlier than we thought. We had Homo erectus in China 1.2 million years ago. That hominid will go with the newest group out of Africa. They will admix and they'll be indigenous. Then another group will come in. And all of those put together is what we've got. It's not much different than the United States. Look at all the different admixtures we have here. Think of all the admixtures we have here. when I have my class do their DNA, I'll take two students. I'll say, just look at your backgrounds. Now imagine if you got married, how many countries would be represented? And they go, oh, I said, there you get it. There you get it. And I had several students who will have, they'll have Spanish, or they'll have Iberian Peninsula, but then they'll have Morocco, Mali, and Senegal, yes. But then they will have, ready for this, the Caucasus and China, all in the same DNA, which means people moved. People were ambassadors. People traveled. And one of the things you and I think that, maybe you don't forget this, I forget it, is people will move and stay where they moved to set up shop. One of my students, last name is Whittingham. His great-great-grandfather went from Scotland with a trading company to Cartagena in Colombia. They made so much business that the great-great-grandfather stayed, and a bunch of Scots moved from Scotland to Cartagena and stayed as they were running this huge successful trading company and stayed. And the result was they intermarried with the locals and the natives. So they had admixtures with the natives, admixtures with the Spanish, and all the Scots. And so when you look at Whittingham, he doesn't speak, he doesn't look anything, he looks all Scots, but he's all Spanish culture. And he said, that's my family. We look all very Scots. Some of us have red hair, some of us have blonde hair, some of us have all kinds of stuff. We look European, but we're all Spanish culture. And that happens all over the place. So the admixtures will come together, and that will ultimately birth what we now call the Vedic religion. Again, the word Hindu is a foreign word. So, what was that, Doug? I was years ago, Doug, I can't read. I was driving through German. Would you read it for us?
Yeah, years ago, you were talking about Neanderthal, and years ago when I was driving through east of Cologne, came across a sign with a river's name on it. It said Neander.
Oh, yes, yes. Is that where the first guy was? Is that where the first guy was discovered,
yeah.
right?
And the word Tal is valley in German. And I was like, Neanderthal, that is
The first discovered, right?
First
The
one
very
was
first
discovered.
discovered.
Right.
And it turns out everything we thought about them when I was growing up is totally wrong. They were very smart. They were artistic. Learned how to survive. I mean, it was a very fascinating culture. Very fascinating.
The first one was found in the mid-19th century.
Yeah, way back then. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we begin then, as you get all of this, this will then prepare you for how the Arapa culture and the Indus Valley culture becomes together. And from that will be birthed what we will ultimately call Hinduism, which, hint, is as wide and diverse as the groups that made it up. Does that make sense? Imagine all of these groups here went into making up what we call Hinduism. The religion itself is diverse as everything you see here. And it makes great joy in that. Where everybody else tries to make you believe the same thing or tries to put you in schools, Hinduism is like this giant mangrove. There's another analogy. What's the name of the tree that its root, its branches will come down to the ground and start roots again?
Ficus.
Ficus, that's it. Imagine a ficus.
Also,
banyan, also called
banyan.
Banyan
A
is
Bodhi
one
tree.
particular, the Bodhi tree. That's one particular species of ficus.
Okay. Yeah. So imagine then Hinduism is being like this and comes around and grow and keeps going and keeps going. So that's why when you study Hinduism, there's great joy in seeing how incredibly diverse it is. And that's perfectly fine. There is no angst about that at all. None whatsoever. And this is where we get the idea you can believe multiple things at the same time that are contradictory, and that's perfectly fine. Thank you very much. And the Indians were the ones who came up with that. Where was I growing up? Shut up, Kenneth. All right. So I'll finish the recording. We've got an introduction now, and I'll begin to discuss the Arapa culture in Indus Valley. And I think you're going to see how much that makes sense after we've had the prequel. And then we're going to start taking a look at some basic things. There are 5 basic things that most Hindus would agree to. and then take a look at some different types of yogas, some different types of aspects of divine reality. Some of you may find that your theology is more Hindu than you realized. For what it's worth, you may find that. And I love the paw on the neck. What would we do without dogs and cats? And finally, before I sign off, those of you who have cats, yes, you're getting your due next Sunday on the 27th. Nanette and Ray will be quoted nicely as a point of view when it comes time to the readings, including Shel Silverstein and Humpty-Back Camels. All right, let's say goodbye to everybody this morning. Pat, goodbye, my cousin. Nanette up in Connecticut. Melissa, big smiles today. Ron, who has made it in from the coast. Bichon freezes. Yes, Mary Grimmy, my other cousin Doug, my cousin AJ, who's been adopted into the family like Ron. Good Lord. Maureen, Karen is on a road trip. She and her boyfriend are driving all over the place. You may have seen pictures of them camping. Barbara Young is back from the wilds, and we're glad to have her back. Thing one is still in New York. Show them your ponytail. Yes, she is out there in New York. Nick is here in town, was working. Roy is from Bellevue, Washington, made it in this morning. And Kay Schweitzer in from Port Orange. Cecilia down the street. Sarah from Alabama. Serge is at work. Thank you all. We've got a lot going on, and I'll give you more of the updates on dogs, cats, and don't forget the Florida blue centipede whose name is Roland. All right. Bye-bye, everybody. Pride Month, Juneteenth. Bless you all.